hospital on him. That was real clever, but they really kidnapped him because he don't have no.
And we are back with some breaking news. This news broke late last night. And so we want you to go ahead and get involved with your like button. The like button wants some love for this breaking news. Now get this, y'all. Lil D, one of the two Lil Ds. This Lil D is Quindarius Zachary, not to be confused with the Lil D that Woody birthed.
Do you know someone by the name of Demekion Garlington?
Street name.
Little D.
For sure.
How do you know Little D?
I didn't birth him.
I'm sorry, say that again.
I almost birthed him.
You almost birthed him?
Yeah.
Tell the jury, what do you mean by that?
I mean, he my son.
So we're not talking about Demekion Garlington yet. Later in this video, we will bring some other breaking news from last night about Demekion Garlington's aunt and Detective Gaither. Just explosive news, so stick around for that. But for now, we're not talking about Demekion Garlington, which is one Little D. We're talking about the man that you see on your screen right now, Quindarius Zachary. He has been arrested after leaving the hospital. Apparently he has a very serious illness and the prosecutors wanted him to come to court. So you are going to see here shortly how he was arrested as he left the hospital. So a very, very big thank you and shout out to Taylor Umbridge on TikTok, who is bringing us this information. Link to her channel, her TikTok channel. Go like, subscribe, do all the stuff with her on TikTok, and also the infamous Sylvia, who also shows up in one of these videos. So without further ado, y'all, let's get directly into the content. Like, comment, subscribe to my channel as well, okay? And let's get into it.
Bargain knows we have no interest in this case whatsoever. We feel sorry for everything what happened to everybody, but you know, every time like my son gets sick a lot, they know that. They call him Sick D anyway. They've been calling him Sick D. And then y'all gonna wait at the hospital on him? That was real clever, but they really kidnapped him because he don't have nothing. The subpoena had expired. We were waiting on a new one. We couldn't get a new one. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, but remember, it's an open subpoena because the trial is still going on.
This is what I'm telling you. They called the lawyer, they called him, they've been calling everybody to give him the new subpoena. But when we tried to get it or whatever, we couldn't never get in, they could never get in touch with it. He done changed his number. So they never gave him the new subpoena. They called his lawyer, and his lawyer told him, I'm not retained, so I can't get him the subpoena. They called the doctor told him that he can't get into it. They called the mom, she told him that they called me, and he wouldn't call me. Then they called the lawyer back. He tried to click me on the three-way. They hung up. He heard both lines click. He said, why are they running from you? I said, I don't know. Maybe they just want to talk. See, because I had already told them the day, whatever day the subpoena is, that's the day we'll be in court. We're not coming to lay around and talk to y'all and play with y'all. Whatever day you subpoena for, we'll be there from that day and forth. But they never gave us. From the real, let me tell you what the state did, right? You heard them say, him and his attorney came in together and right? You heard him say that, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was not Quindarius' attorney. Quindarius asked for a lawyer. They went and got Ricky because Ricky had inquired about the case from the open and got Ricky to bring him in there. See, the moment he asked for an attorney and they tricked my attorney to bring him in there, they violated his rights too. Because guess what? If you're not retained, what fish do you have to fry in this fight? So when they say his attorney came in, I want y'all to laugh at her because she paid him to come in there. Because we didn't pay him to come in there. You call it cap all you want. We didn't pay him to come in there. So if we didn't pay him to come in there, he wasn't supposed to be in there. We knew nothing about that until they said it on case.
So people are absolutely outraged at the way that apparently the district attorney, maybe Love, went about handling this situation. If you notice on Friday, Love was not in court, and a lot of people are speculating that perhaps Love was out there in the field, maybe Of course, we don't know, right? But people are speculating that perhaps Love was out there in the field going and making sure that this arrest would happen, because apparently she needs Lil D to help tie different parts of her case together. So I think it's important for you to see some of Lil D's recorded interrogation tapes. I am going to include those recordings at the end of this video after we talk about Demekion Garlington and what happened, what was revealed about him last night. So let's go ahead and hop into this video about the revelations related to Demekion Garlington, his aunt in particular, and Detective Gaither.
They know what's going on. Detective Gaither was married to Lil D auntie. They stayed in the house together. It's two Lil D. They stay in the house together. So how can you investigate a crime from your children, from your nephew and his friends? How can Detective Gaither have any grace about herself and you chasing around your nephew and his friend? You married to his mom's sister. Y'all stay together. Y'all been married together since the investigation started. So y'all been, and then not only that, okay, if you such a justified police, you told me you were ignoring 911 calls. That means people were calling in saying, I'm dying, and you were hanging up the phone. She was ignoring 911 calls and got promoted. How do the investigation even go on beyond that? Yeah, I don't understand. She YSL Gaither.
Most data is not perfectly preserved or curated, and that's where we get involved.
YSL Gaither.
Wow, YSL Gaither. So what do y'all think about this? I mean, listen, I'm bringing y'all this information as it was shared on TikTok. Of course, I have not been able to verify any of it, but we're bringing it to you. And we want to get the community's reaction. What do y'all think? What do you think about Lil D being arrested, leaving the hospital after supposedly having blood transfusions? What do you think about the other Lil D living with Detective Gaither, who's actively trying to put a case on all the YSL people? You know, you can't make this stuff up, y'all. So listen, with that, what we're going to do is we're going to shoot into some previous recordings so that you can get oriented related to Lil D, Zachary, because it looks like he's going to be in court this coming up week. So watch this so that you can have that context when he does come to court and you'll know what it's all about.
Just to let you know what the unintelligible is, on 122 line 12, Mr. Zachary says, nah, Birdman, they asked, did he order that murder? Talking about Birdman, Mr. Brian Williams. Nah, Birdman, like he mad at, when he thought Thug had something to do with the tour bus, he mad at him. Like, I don't know how Mr. Zachary can convey Mr. Williams, not Jeffrey Williams, Brian Williams' thoughts about, well, not even knowledge, is speculation, what his feelings are about an event that neither of them were present for. That just strikes me as a whole lot of speculation. Zachary is speculating about what Brian Williams is speculating about. And I just can't see a world where that would be coming in.
Okay, well, I think that Mr. Adkins is essentially conceding that unless the state is able to establish a foundation for how Zachary can testify to what Birdman is feeling, that they wouldn't be able to use this. Right?
Correct, Your Honor.
Okay.
Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
The state of Georgia had Mr. Brian Williams on their short list. They did not call him. Same with Rich Homie Kwan or Mr. Lamar. I specifically asked the very first witness in the case. He testified several times. I can't remember his name. Belknap. Belknap. He's with City of Atlanta Police Department. Whether he is alleging that Mr. Brian Williams was part of any type of conspiracy, any type of gang. And he said, no, it's entertainment for show. He has no information. He was not making that claim. So it's total hearsay. There's no co-conspirator link. This would be just, I heard him say something or I didn't hear him say something, so I would object on that basis.
Okay.
Besides, reading someone's mind and what your court said.
Okay. Well,
I'd like to cross-examine Mr. Brian Williams.
What he's saying is, no, I don't think he had anything to do with it anyway, but.
Your Honor, if I thought Detective Belknap had discussed some of that Mr. Birdman was a blood, but we're not saying this is a co-conspirator statement
Right.
for one, and who the state calls or doesn't call is irrelevant to the evidentiary considerations for today.
Sure.
Is the state's position.
I mean, I agree.
I disagree because being a blood, quote unquote, I'm not saying that the gentleman is, I'm not trying to tarnish him or maybe say something accurately, but that's come out in this trial. That's not illegal.
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed. I just think as to this issue, if and when it potentially arises at trial, we take it up then. But at this point, the state understands that they don't have a foundation to be able to use this.
Correct.
Okay. All right. 123.
Your Honor, we addressed part of this yesterday in terms of Detective Gaither asked, do you think that Thug ordered that against Nutt, talking
Right.
about the murder? And Zachary says, nah, they're just trying to get a name. This had came up yesterday. It kind of falls in a similar category where the state would have to lay more foundation for how Zachary knows that their motive, knows someone motive. Is it because they told him? Is it because he interacts with them daily? So we would not just ask Mr. Zachary cold, why did they do X, Y, Z? There would have to be adequate questions for that foundation.
All right.
Well, we would object to an order now to eliminate the first word of no. I don't believe that Jeffrey Williams ordered that. If you're saying it's a co-conspirator and he would know about it, then that is relevant. And I don't want to ask from the questioning.
I'm not sure if I follow you.
Okay. So I think that the answer by Mr. Zachary, the direct question is, do you have any evidence that Mr. Williams, Jeffrey Williams, knew about or ordered the
Right.
killing? The answer is no.
Right.
Then he goes on, and that part, I agree, should come out. But the no, or the nah, N-A-H, I assume, should not be struck if you're striking things.
Okay, well, I'm not striking or not striking this right now. All of it could only come in if there's some sort of an inconsistency and they're presenting it as, to impeach or something like that. So
In Your Honor,
I mean, I guess there are two separate, do you think that Thug ordered the murder? And the answer to that. And then
The next part.
the people that he thinks did do it and why.
Understood. And I just don't, the first part to be part of the equation of that potentially is not going to be put.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, they would be two separate items.
yes, Your Honor. And the way I could potentially see some of this coming out is if Mr. Zachary was asked questions about, because in this interview, he describes, and I mean, he tells Detective Dennis YSL is a gang, and he talks about who he interacts with. And so if we asked him questions about, how does that work? People making a name for themselves or going up in rank, some of these could become relevant if he says, I don't know what you're talking about, things like that.
The same ruling that I made with regard to there are a couple of other comments. Yes, you would be able to use that part of it. They're just trying to make a name to show, okay, yeah, this is how it works. And you have told us this before.
Correct, Your Honor.
Yeah. So that's kind of separate as well. And you could use it for that. And then there's, if you are using it to show, what he knew or didn't know about who ordered it, then you need a foundation for his knowledge of that.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. That clear for everybody?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right.
Your Honor, could I just add one, a 24B to my list? And
Yeah,
it doesn't
sure.
even show up.
Okay.
It doesn't show up in the transcript, but I think it affects Mr. Williams, frankly. Off the transcript, where, well, you see it, but the transcript's not accurate. On 123, line 12, the woman, who's investigator Gaither, is asking about the rank of who's the leader, and she's suggesting that Mr. Jeffrey Williams may be the leader of YSL, and Quindarius says, who said Doug's the higher up, essentially. I think that's a pretty accurate quote. And investigator Gaither, and it shows up at the end where after it says unintelligible, she's actually interrupted by Quindarius.
Okay.
And she says, that's just what I heard. I do believe that it would be improper to play investigator Gaither basically an out-of-court statement suggesting that she's heard from other people that Mr. Jeffrey Williams is the higher up of YSL. It's confrontation clause and hearsay.
So, Your Honor, Detective Gaither she's testified previously in this trial, but this portion, when she says, who said Thug is hired, Detective Dennis is like, who's the boss, who runs YSL? Zachary says, he was not right there when they started YSL. And they're like, who started it? And he says, my brother and Slug, who is Trontavious Stevens, also known as Tick. And so the state's not going to ask Zachary, did Detective Gaither tell you that she believes Thug was hired? That is not what a question that the state would ask. But however, this portion could become relevant in terms of he's acknowledging YSL's a gang. When she says, when she says, isn't Thug the highest, or however she phrases it, he's like, who said Thug was higher, which acknowledges there's a gang with some kind of hierarchy, or because he would have been like, what do you mean higher over what? You know, so so the state, if Mr. Shart's objection is to Detective Gaither's, words saying, I heard Thug was higher, the state does not intend to be asking Zachary about Detective Gaither's opinion on Defendant Williams or the YSL gang. But this portions of it in relation to Zachary saying who he believes started YSL and his own brother, that kind of stuff, he has adequate foundation. We'd have to ask him on the stand to explain that. That's kind of the state's.
And I don't have a problem with anything that Mr. Atkins just said. All I'm saying is, and they could ask about that, and quite honestly, I think the defense likes Mr. Zachary's answers. All we're objecting to is if it's played, there's a prior inconsistent played to the part that investigator Gaither says, that's just what I heard, referencing that Mr. Williams is the leader.
Okay, so you're saying if for whatever reason it does end up getting played, strike that's just what I heard part.
Correct.
Any problem with that?
No, I agree with Mr. Shart on that.
All right.
Or the state does.
Sounds good.
Your Honor, the next one, to make it easier on everyone. So I think there was a bond hearing or something that Detective Dennis or Gaither, they're referencing a court hearing and arguments that Mr. Zachary's attorney made. They were like, those are good arguments. We all know that. Anyways, the state is not going to be asking. We're conceding this in regards to it's a really brief back and forth where they're laughing about a court hearing, about the argument on bond, about the gang. And so the state's not going to be asking Mr. Zachary anything related to number 26.
Okay. So redacted by agreement.
Your Honor, and also on number 27,
Yes.
there is and he says that earlier. And so when Detective Thorpe, who's the lead detective on Donovan Thomas murder, comes into the room, there's some greetings, and then Detective Gaither kind of tells Mr. Zachary, Thorpe's been working really hard on the case. We've been talking to a lot of people. We appreciate your honesty. The state's not going to I don't think this will come up, so the state's conceding this portion in terms of, I'm not going to be asking Mr. Zachary about if Detective Dennis and Gaither thought he was truthful or doing a good job.
Okay. Thank you. Was that all that one needed to cover?
Correct. It's just them bolstering,
All right.
basically,
Yeah.
on the tape.
Okay. All right. 135.
So, Your Honor, this one, what is Mr. Zachary says, I think Nard was driving them, and then Thorpe just kind of repeats, okay, Nard was driving. This is when they're speaking about, because Zachary at the beginning of this interview talks to Detective Gaither and Dennis some about Donovan Thomas's murder, and then they get Detective Thorpe to come over because he's the lead homicide detective. And so he goes into more detail at that part. So the state, this part of the interview, Mr. Zachary, as like all of his interviews, he's not saying directly where this is coming from, but the state's position, kind of similar to yesterday, is that the primary source of Mr. Zachary's knowledge is from when he says Defendant Stillwell, Defendant Kendricks told him that night. He also has a brief mention when he goes down to Miami with them that he had some kind of conversation with with Demise McMullen, Nard. And so he does say, I think Nard was driving them. The state's position, and again, this may depend on the foundation of the questions he's asked, but the pool of information that the state's aware of from Zachary's statements is other co-conspirators telling him about either their own involvement in the murder.
Okay.
And Your Honor, my stance, as previously stated, is that if Mr. Zachary is claiming the source is anyone other than my client, Mr. Stillwell, I would object. However, if the source, I understand the court's prior rulings, and if the source falls under the court's prior rulings, I understand what your ruling is.
Okay.
But I don't, as I sit here now, I have no idea what his source is with some of these statements that he's making.
Okay. Well, I think we have to take the entirety of the statement into consideration, but that would fall under my prior rulings with regard to the co-conspirator exception. So that'll be permitted.
Your Honor, I believe next is number 29, which is 136, line 18 to 137, line 11.
Okay.
In this portion, Detective Thorpe says, after the shooting, do you know what happened to the cars and the guns? And Zachary says, yeah, they dropped it off at O.G. Bentley's spot, who's Mr. Treadwell. And he asked them, do you know if the guns are still around? Did they get rid of them? And Zachary says, most likely got rid of them. He's supposed to have gotten rid of them. And then they have a conversation about, Detective Gaither's like, how do they usually get rid of guns? And Zachary's like, well, this is the first time. Usually we keep the guns. And Detective Thorpe asked if anyone got a word to shoot nut, which is one we kind of just addressed. And he says they just wanted a name. So it's speculation, hearsay. I think the speculation objection is coming from where he says, do you know if the gun's around? He's like, they most likely got rid of them. The state's position here is that, again, his source of them going to Kevin Treadwell's house is, again, the same co-conspirator statements. And he is not definitively at the house or see them bury the guns in the backyard or throw them in a river. But I think it's reasonable to think that from his conversations with them that they went there to get the car and the guns so that they couldn't be caught. So the speculation is Zachary's not physically present at I have no information that he physically saw these guns being hidden. But I think because he spoke with co-conspirators about it, it is not as speculative as that question seems.
He has a basis for knowing from his other co-conspirators that they were dropped off.
Yes, Your Honor.
What happened to them after that? That is what he's speculating. He knows the purpose was to get rid of them, but whether they were actually gotten rid of past O.G. Bentley's place, he doesn't know.
Correct, Your Honor.
But that they were dropped off, he does know.
Correct. And because he kind of answers, like, it's clear that he doesn't exactly know if this particular portion through impeachment came in, it's, he's kind of telling, like, I don't know exactly, I think they did, but it makes sense in the context of the conversation he has a couple hours after the murder.
Right.
Well,
with those parameters.
And it just goes, I've stated my objection. I understand the court's ruling. However, I do believe that 9 and 9 and 11, lines 9 and 11 on 137 are a little different because, again, that is just, from my understanding, just pure speculation about motive.
And this is kind of similar, Your Honor, in terms of the state would have to ask him foundation about how does he know they wanted a name.
Sure. All right.
Okay, on this one, Your Honor.
Hang on just a second. I need to actually figure out where we are, because so that actually, even though 130,
I wrote it.
so that went past what is notated on your number.
It was supposed to say 136.18 to 137,
Okay.
line 11.
All right. That's, I looked down and I'm like, well, we're talking about 137. Okay. All right. Now I'm back with y'all. Okay. 138.
So number 30, number 30 on my list. This transcript is really rough here, so I'm just gonna, if the court allows me, just
Sure.
on 138 line 6. Mr. Zachary is talking about Shannon. So Shannon's the topic.
Okay.
Gaither says, right. Zachary says, like, Thug really wasn't messing with him. He was around Thug as Woody's friend. Okay. So they're still talking about Shannon. Line 13, right. So once he did that, it was kind of like, we can trust him. Zachary says, yeah. And then line 17, she says, we know he a shooter.
Okay.
That's my objection. The law enforcement saying, we know Shannon's a shooter.
Okay.
And so, Your Honor, this portion, which I agree with what Mr. Shard's saying, that this time hack states. And so they're talking about, it starts with Zachary has a comment where he's like, usually Woody and Moontunk are doing all the shooting. And then Gaither's like, well, did Mr. Copeland slow down with his BS? And he says, when he's around a lot of folks, he gets pumped up. And they're kind of asking, how did Shannon Stillwell get into the picture? And so he's like, well, he was friends with Copeland, comes around. And Zachary says, no one really knew Mr. Stillwell that well. And then, the way that what they're talking about is after the murder of Donovan Thomas. Mm-hmm. Gaither's like, well, once he did that, and that is the murder of Donovan Thomas, that we could trust him, know he's a shooter. And Zachary's response is, he started messing with Shannon hard. I take the he being defendant Williams. And so the state feels that Detective Gaither's question to get Zachary's response, if the right questions are asked on the stand, could be relevant because, for one, Zachary on some level confirms what she's saying, because he's like, after she says, now they can trust him, they know he's a shooter, Zachary says he started messing with Shannon hard, kind of confirming that, yeah, he started messing with him or hanging out with him or being closer with him because he was a shooter in the context of what Zachary's saying happened on January 10th, 2015. So the state feels that it's not just Gaither in a vacuum saying, we know Shannon's a shooter. I'm not going to ask Zachary what's Detective Gaither's opinion. But yes, my apologies, Madam Court Reporter. But it could become relevant because of asking Zachary in the context of his relationship with Mr. Copeland, how defendant Stillwell came into the picture, that this exact clip, if the right questions are asked, could become relevant to get Mr. Zachary's response.
Okay.
But if this clip is played, line 13 says, right. So once he did that, it was kind of like, we can trust him. And Zachary says, yeah. And then we could easily go to line 19. He started messing with Shannon and then they go into Woody becoming a new Slug and Shannon becoming the new Woody, but none of that requires line 17, law enforcement saying, we know he's a shooter. That's my objection, specifically that line. I understand. Right.
So up above on line 6, what gets said then? They already knew Shannon liked something.
I just have it say that until. Like that until. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's what they're kind of interrupting each other.
Yeah.
My note, Your Honor, is Zachary says, nah, so lines like 2 or 3, Detective Gaither says, did Woody slow down with his BS? And Zachary says, nah, when he's seen that there's a lot of folks around Woody, they pumped him back up. No one knew Shannon like that until Thug, not really messing with him. He was around Thug because he's Woody's friend.
I agree.
Yeah, that's on the prior page, right?
That's 138, line 10. Right, Mr. Atkins? That's where you're at?
I believe so. The transcript lines I'm looking at, I went back through and added, from listening to it. So my line and page is a little off, but.
Well, I see did Woody slow down with all his BS once Nut got killed? Or was he still?
Right. That was on 137.
Right.
And
then this is the answers, no, he'd get pumped back up, or what?
Yes, Your Honor. It's Zachary says, nah, when he's seeing that there's a lot of folks around Woody, then he pumps back up. And then he says, no one knew Shannon like that until Thug, not really messing with him. He was around Thug because he was Woody's friend.
And then Gaither says, right. So once he did that, it was kind of like, we can trust him. Quindarius Zachary says, yeah. And then Gaither says, we know he's a shooter, or we know he a shooter.
Right.
And I don't know why the Gaither would be allowed to make a declaratory statement, whether she's talking generally that law enforcement has determined that he's a shooter, right, or if he's a shooter in this case, right, that's a question for the jury.
Right. But I mean, assuming that he started messing with him hard after that is actually in response to the statement, we know he's a shooter. Well, and maybe I just need to listen to this part.
I view it more of a response to line 13, where she says, so once he did that, it was kind of like, we can trust him, and he's like, yeah. And then you could easily go, he started messing with Shannon he started messing with Shannon. He repeats himself. I don't know why. And then they don't really, there's no real meat to what Zachary says, because then they move on to Woody. But my concern is specifically with, we know he a shooter.
I understand. I'm going to listen to it. It may not elucidate anything, but where is this timestamp?
So, Your Honor, I have a little bit before this is at 3:25:44.
Okay. I'll just start there. And you did send this video or no? I can't remember.
I will double check, Your Honor.
Okay. Just make sure y'all do so that I can
That's
listen
right.
to
We
it.
did give a thumb drive, so it should be.
Oh, so it was on the same thumb drive that the other one was. Okay. I know there were like 4 items on there.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll listen. Y'all can remind me to circle back on it. Do we have that other thing queued up?
Yes, Your Honor, and I wanted to make certain that I got the exact time because I just pulled it over to this time right when you want to listen to this.
Yeah, we're going over it.
And I mean, maybe we can just listen to them both while it's up. I don't know.
Keith, forward it to Keratin.
Your Honor, for the record purposes, we're pulling up. We're going to start at 308:50.
All right, and this is, we're going back to item number which?
We are going back to this. Actually kind of tackles a couple items because this is all about who shot Lucci's mother's home. But I believe what prompted us to go back was
Item number 23, was that the one we were?
yes, Your Honor. I think it was 23
Yeah.
because we weren't sure if Zachary physically saw these guns or
Right, okay. Right. And I've been told that if I plug a headphone into the computer, if I'm on Zoom, maybe I can hear it better. I don't know if that's true. I have to get on Zoom first. Are you playing it through Zoom or are you playing it off your computer? All right, let me then join Zoom. And figure out where this might plug in.
Your Honor, before we play, so 308:50 is when they first start. Literally, Detective Dennis asked him who shot up Lucci's mother's home. And then I'm happy to start there for the court if the court would like. There's about 3 minutes of conversation, but when he specifically starts talking about what kind of gun did Shannon have on it, which is more tethered to number 23, I can jump just to that part. I want to just ask the court if you want me to play a little bit before or go right to when he's discussing the part about who had what firearms.
If you think the context will help, that's fine.
Okay. We'll start at 308:50, Your Honor.
All right.